A developing tropical low off the Queensland coast, severe thunderstorms inland, and a temperature split across the eastern states, that S, about to create some significant weather. That S what we are looking at over the coming days. I've examined the latest from the Bureau of Meteorology, looked at multiple forecast models, and there's agreement on the broad pattern, but some uncertainty in the details. Worth paying close attention to this one, particularly if you were in South East Queensland or the Wide Bay region. Right now across Queensland, conditions are already building. Mount Carbine in far north Queensland hit 30 degrees by 10:30 this morning with 85% humidity. Minimum overnight was 26 degrees. That is the kind of tropical air mass we were dealing with. 1 hour of heavy rain last night up there, which tells you the moisture content in the atmosphere is already substantial. Further south, the Gold Coast is heading for 35 degrees on Sunday, stinking hot. Inland areas have been copping massive storms with that heat and humidity combination. The contrast you're experiencing right now from the tropical conditions up north to the more temperate weather down south is all part of the setup for what is coming. Compare that to further south. Carcoa in central New South Wales saw a top of 26 degrees with an overnight minimum of 14. Clear skies with only small clouds moving through. Sydney Metro has been dealing with rain since Saturday morning through to today. Not heavy, persistent stuff. They were expecting around 1 millimetre tomorrow and Thursday before it clears. That low pressure system that brought that rain is now moving offshore, and that S where things get interesting. Let me walk you through the synoptic setup, because understanding the mechanics here helps explain why this system has potential. We've got a monsoon trough positioned across northern Australia. That S normal for this time of year. The monsoon trough is essentially a semi-permanent area of low pressure that sits across the top end and extends east into the Coral Sea during our wet season. It's the breeding ground for tropical lows and cyclones. What is happening now is a disturbance within that trough positioned off the central Queensland coast. The sea surface temperatures in the Coral Sea are sitting around 28 to 29 degrees Celsius. That S warm enough to support tropical development. For a tropical low to intensify into a cyclone, you need sea surface temperatures above 26.5 degrees. We've got that. But sea surface temperature is only one ingredient. You also need low wind shear. Wind shear is the difference in wind speed and direction at different heights in the atmosphere. High wind shear tears apart developing tropical systems. Low wind shear lets them organise and intensify. Right now, the wind shear across the region is moderate. Not ideal for rapid intensification, but not prohibitive either. The models show that shear potentially decreasing early next week, particularly on Monday. If shear drops while the system remains over warm water, we could see intensification. Now, I've been asked about the percentage chance of shear increasing or decreasing on Monday in South East Queensland. Based on the current model runs, ID put the chance of shear remaining favourable for development at around 40 to 50%. That S, not a guarantee, but it is significant enough to warrant close monitoring. The GFS model is slightly more optimistic about shear decreasing than the Access model, but both show similar overall patterns. The European model, which often handles tropical systems well, shows the low potentially intensifying to tropical cyclone strength if it remains offshore long enough. But there is considerable uncertainty in the track. Some model runs have it moving south along the coast. Others show it tracking more southeast away from the coast. A few outliers show it making landfall somewhere between Bundaberg and the Sunshine Coast. That track uncertainty is critical. If this system stays offshore and moves south parallel to the coast, southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales could see several days of heavy rainfall, strong winds and rough seas. If it moves offshore to the southeast, impacts would be much less significant. If it makes landfall, you are looking at a different scenario altogether with potentially damaging winds and very heavy rainfall. Let me be clear about the current situation. As of the latest Bureau update, this is a tropical low, not a tropical cyclone. It doesn't have a defined circulation centre yet. The pressure isn't particularly low. But the potential for development is there, and the Bureau has highlighted this system in their tropical outlook. For those asking about impacts on Christmas Island and Cocos Islands, those Australian territories are well to the west of this system. They re-knot under threat from this particular low. Different weather patterns affect those areas, primarily systems moving off the Indian Ocean. Let's talk about what you can expect regionally over the coming days, starting with far north Queensland and working south. Far north Queensland from Cairns north to Cape York. You're already in the thick of the monsoon pattern. Expect continued showers and thunderstorms, typical for this time of year. The tropical low developing to your south 1T have much direct impact on your weather. Your main concerns remain localised heavy rainfall from daily storms, high humidity and the usual wet season challenges. If you in low-lying areas prone to flooding, keep an eye on rainfall totals. Creek and river levels can rise quickly with these monsoon storms. Central Queensland from Mackay down to about Bundaberg. This is where the uncertainty is highest. If the tropical low remains offshore and intensifies, you could see impacts from Tuesday onwards. Heavy rainfall is possible, potentially 100 to 200 millimetres over several days if the system stalls or moves slowly. Winds could increase to gale force along the coast. Seas already rough, building further. But again, this depends entirely on the track. If it moves away to the southeast, you might just see some showers and squally weather. Wide Bay and the Sunshine Coast. Similar story. Potential for heavy rainfall mid to late next week if the system tracks close to the coast. The timing looks like Wednesday through Friday at this stage, but that could shift. Soil moisture is already elevated from recent rain, so additional heavy falls could lead to flash flooding in catchment areas. South East Queensland, Brisbane Metro to the Gold Coast. You're dealing with heat and humidity right now. That continues into the weekend. 35 degrees forecast for the Gold Coast on Sunday is a scorcher. Brisbane similar. The humidity makes it feel even worse. That hot, sticky air mass is being drawn northward ahead of the developing system. Come early next week, conditions change. If the tropical low develops and moves south, as some models suggest, you could transition from hot and dry to cool and wet quite rapidly. Easterly winds would increase, bringing moisture on shore. Temperatures would drop. Heavy rainfall possible, particularly Tuesday through Thursday. The wild card here is thunderstorms. With the instability in the atmosphere, the moisture and the lifting mechanisms from the low pressure system, severe thunderstorms are likely across inland southeast Queensland and the Darling Downs. We're already seeing huge storms inland. That pattern intensifies as the tropical moisture interacts with the more unstable air mass over the ranges. Severe thunderstorms in this setup can produce very heavy rainfall in short periods, damaging winds, large hail and dangerous lightning. If you're in areas like Toowoomba, the Lockyer Valley or the Scenic Rim, be prepared for severe storm activity over the next several days. For those who have already boarded up windows on the Gold Coast, that might be a bit premature, but I appreciate the preparedness mindset. We are not at cyclone preparation stage yet. This is still a developing situation. But it's worth having a plan, checking your emergency kit and staying informed. Northern New South Wales, the System S impacts could extend into your area depending on the track. The Northern Rivers, Mid-North Coast and Hunter regions should monitor this closely. If the low moves south along the coast, you are looking at potential heavy rainfall from Wednesday onwards. Flooding is a concern given recent wet weather across the region. South of Newcastle, down through Sydney and into Victoria, you are less likely to see direct impacts from this tropical system. But you are not out of the woods weather-wise. A separate cold front is forecast to move through southern Australia mid-week. That brings its own set of conditions, cooler temperatures, showers and strong winds in the south. Now let's talk about the models in more detail because understanding what they're re-showing and where they disagree helps you make informed decisions. The Access model that the Bureau of Meteorology primary forecast model shows the tropical low developing but not rapidly intensifying. It tracks the system south to southeast, keeping it offshore. Rainfall totals in this scenario are moderate, 50 to 100 millimetres along the coast, less inland. Wind impacts minimal beyond coastal gales. The GFS model, the American Global Model, is more aggressive. It shows potential for the low to deepen more significantly and track closer to the coast. In this scenario, rainfall totals could reach 150 to 250 millimetres along the coast, with winds potentially reaching storm force in some areas. This is a higher impact scenario. The European model, which I mentioned earlier, sits somewhere in between but shows more uncertainty in its ensemble members. That means when you run the model multiple times with slightly different initial conditions, you get a wide spread of outcomes. That wide spread tells us the atmosphere is in a sensitive state. Small changes in initial conditions lead to big differences in outcomes. What does that mean for you? It means we can give you a definitive forecast for impacts beyond the next 48 hours with high confidence. We know the broad pattern. We know a tropical low is developing. We know it has potential to intensify and affect the Queensland coast. But exactly where, when and how much remains uncertain. That's frustrating, I know. You want concrete answers. But meteorology doesn't always cooperate. What I can tell you is that by Friday or Saturday, model agreement should improve as the system develops and its track becomes clearer. In the meantime, here's what you should be doing based on your location. If you are in central or southern Queensland along the coast, now is the time to review your severe weather and flood plans. Not panic preparation, sensible preparation. Know where your important documents are. Have a battery-powered radio and torch with spare batteries. Check your phone is charged and you have a car charger. If you take medications, make sure you have enough supply. If you have pets, have a plan for them. Clear your gutters if they full of leaves. Secure loose items around your property that could become projectiles in strong winds. Outdoor furniture, trampolines, shade sails, anything that could blow around. Not because a cyclone is definitely coming, but because severe thunderstorms are already happening and more are forecast. If you are in a flood-prone area, and you know if you are, think about your options now. Where would you go if you needed to evacuate? What would you take? Don't wait until water is rising to make these decisions. For those with livestock, make sure animals have access to high ground and shelter. Check fences and gates. Heavy rain can create boggy conditions quickly and animals can get bogged. If you rely on tank water, consider topping up your tanks now if you can. Power outages during severe weather are possible and that can affect pumps. Farmers and graziers across the inland areas, you are seeing the thunderstorm activity already. That's likely to continue. Isolated very heavy falls are possible, which can lead to localised flash flooding even if your area hasn't seen much rain recently. Water can come from upstream quickly. Don't cross flooded roads or creeks. If it's flooded, forget it. That is the SES slogan for a reason. For the general public across South East Queensland, the key message is stay informed. Check the Bureau of Meteorology website daily. They update their tropical cyclone outlook regularly during the wet season. If warnings are issued for your area, take them seriously. The Bureau doesn't issue warnings lightly. Download the BOM weather app if you haven't already. Turn on notifications for severe weather warnings for your area. That way you'll get alerts in real time if severe thunderstorms are detected approaching your location. If you're replanning activities over the coming week, particularly outdoor activities or travel in coastal or inland areas, have a backup plan. Weather could deteriorate quickly depending on how this system develops. Now let's talk about some meteorological aspects that make this situation worth watching closely. The interaction between tropical and subtropical air masses is always interesting. You've got the hot, humid tropical air across northern Queensland. That a deep, moist air mass extending several kilometres up into the atmosphere. Then you've got the cooler, drier subtropical air to the south. Where these air masses meet, you get significant weather. The tropical low, if it develops and moves south, is essentially bringing that tropical air mass with it. That why temperatures would drop if easterly winds increase. The easterlies bring maritime air that's been sitting over the ocean. It's cooler than the land-heated air, but it's saturated with moisture. When you have an unstable atmosphere and moisture, and a lifting mechanism like a low-pressure system or a trough, you get convection. Convection is rising air. As air rises, it cools. As it cools, moisture condenses. Condensation releases heat, which makes the air rise even more. That's how you build thunderstorms. In a tropical system, this process happens over a wide area, organised around the low pressure centre. That's why tropical lows and cyclones produce such widespread heavy rainfall. It's not just one or two storms, it's a factory of storms, all feeding off the same moisture source. The wind shear I mentioned earlier affects how these storms organise. Low shear allows storms to stack vertically. The updraft and downdraft are aligned. That S when you get the most intense convection and the potential for the system to deepen rapidly. High shear tilts the storms. The updraft gets separated from the downdraft. That weakens the overall system. Monday is the day to watch for shear. If shear decreases, as some models suggest, and the low is still over water, Monday into Tuesday could see development. If shear remains high, the system might struggle to organise and could weaken instead. Sea surface temperatures play a role in maintaining the system. 28 to 29 degrees in the Coral Sea is plenty warm. But if the system moves south into cooler waters, it would weaken. The Tasman Sea is cooler than the Coral Sea. So track matters not just for land impacts, but for the system S intensity. Upper level dynamics also matter. There is a weakness in the subtropical ridge, the semi-permanent high pressure system that sits over southern Australia. That weakness allows the low to potentially move south. If that ridge strengthens, it could steer the system more to the east, away from the coast. If it weakens further, the low could track closer to land. These upper level patterns are harder to forecast with precision beyond a few days. That is another source of uncertainty in the track forecast. Let me address some specific concerns that come up with tropical systems. Storm surge is a concern if a tropical cyclone makes landfall. But right now, this is a tropical low, not a cyclone. If it intensifies to cyclone strength and makes landfall, storm surge would be a factor, particularly along exposed coastlines and in estuaries and bays. But we are not there yet. The Bureau will provide specific storm surge warnings if that becomes a risk. Tornadoes can occur with tropical systems, particularly in outer rain bands as they make landfall. They typically weaker than tornadoes from supercell thunderstorms, but they still dangerous. If the system does approach the coast, be aware of tornado potential. Rainfall is likely to be the primary concern, regardless of whether this intensifies to cyclone strength. Tropical lows can produce enormous rainfall totals. The March 2022 floods across South East Queensland and northern New South Wales were caused by a slow-moving low-pressure system, not even a cyclone. Over 600 millimetres fell in some areas over several days. Rivers broke their banks. Communities were isolated, lives were lost. I'm not saying this system will be like that, but it illustrates that you don't need a cyclone to have significant flooding impacts. Slow movement, prolonged heavy rain over already wet catchments, that is the recipe for flooding. River flood warnings are separate from severe weather warnings. If this system does bring prolonged heavy rain, the Bureau will issue flood watches and flood warnings for affected river systems. Pay attention to those. They specific about which rivers, which towns, and what level of flooding is expected. Minor, moderate, or major flooding. Each has different impacts. If you are near a river or creek, know what minor, moderate, and major flooding means for your area. The Bureau S Flood Warning Service provides detailed information for each river system. For those interested in the longer range pattern beyond this immediate system, the outlook remains typical for this time of year. We're in the cyclone season, which runs from November through to April. On average, the Australian region sees about 11 tropical cyclones per season. Some years more, some less. So far, this season has been relatively quiet. This developing low could be the first named cyclone of the season if it intensifies sufficiently. The broader climate drivers, El Niño, La Niña, Indian Ocean dipole, are currently in neutral phases. That means no strong signal towards wet or dry conditions beyond the normal seasonal patterns. The monsoon is active across the north, which is normal. Tropical lows and cyclones forming in the Coral Sea or Gulf of Carpentaria are part of the seasonal cycle. What makes each system significant or not is its track and intensity. A cyclone that crosses the coast near a populated area is a major event. One that stays offshore or crosses in a remote area has minimal impact beyond marine interests. We don't know yet which category this system falls into. That is why continued monitoring is essential. Check forecasts daily. The Bureau updates their tropical cyclone outlooks every 6 hours during active periods. morning, lunchtime, evening and late night. If a cyclone watch or warning is issued, that's updated even more frequently. Local knowledge matters. If you've lived in your area for years, you know what weather patterns cause problems. Trust that knowledge. If something feels off, if the weather is developing in a way that concerns you, take action. Wait for official warnings if you can see danger developing, but also panic based on social media speculation. Stick to official sources. The Bureau of Meteorology, your state emergency service, local council warnings. These organisations have the expertise and the data to provide accurate, timely information. If severe weather warnings are issued, they'll specify what areas are affected, what weather is expected and what actions to take. Read those warnings carefully. They not generic. They tailored to the specific situation. Right, let's wrap this up with the key points you need to remember. 1. A tropical low is developing off the central Queensland coast. It has potential to intensify depending on environmental conditions, particularly wind shear. 2. Track uncertainty is high. The system could move south along the coast, offshore to the southeast, or potentially make landfall. We want to have clarity on track until the system develops a more defined structure. 3. Regardless of track, severe thunderstorms are likely across inland Queensland and South East Queensland over the coming days. Heavy rainfall, damaging winds, large hail possible. 4. If the system develops and moves south along the coast, heavy rainfall and strong winds are possible for central and southern Queensland coast from Tuesday onwards. 5. Flooding is a concern given recent wet weather and the potential for prolonged heavy rainfall. 6. Now is the time for sensible preparation. Review your plans, secure loose items, stay informed. Don't panic, but don't be complacent either. 7. Check the Bureau of Meteorology daily for updates. Forecasts will improve as the system develops. For those in affected areas, I know this uncertainty is frustrating. You want to know exactly what is going to happen so you can plan accordingly. But atmospheric science has limits. We read better than we used to be. Models have improved dramatically over the years. But predicting the exact behaviour of a developing tropical system days in advance isn't possible with complete certainty. What we can do is give you the most likely scenarios, the range of possibilities, and the level of confidence in those forecasts. Right now, confidence is moderate for the broad pattern, lower for specific details. By the weekend, that should improve. The system will either develop or at 1T. Its track will become clearer. Impacts will be better defined. Until then, stay weather aware. This is the time of year for tropical weather across northern Australia. Being prepared isn't about this one system. It's about being ready for whatever the wet season brings. That's the situation as it stands. I'll continue monitoring the latest data and model runs. The Bureau will update their forecasts as new information comes in. Keep checking official sources. Look after yourselves, your families, your mates, your animals, your property. This system has potential. Whether that potential is realised depends on atmospheric conditions over the next few days. We